Hello everyone, WYN back again for another video in our tutorial series on how to create an exploiting script for Roblox. In today's video, we'll be concentrating on getting up values and setting up values and how you can use that to exploit a game, as well as getting constants and setting constants. Before we get into that, we're first going to explain what are up values and what are constants. So for that, we'll jump right into some code. All right, so let's begin with a quick session on what are up values. So I'm going to use the Visual Studio Code, same script we were working on before, but I'm just going to write a function to show you up values. So let's say I declare a variable, which we've already discussed in other videos, local variables. We'll call it just weapon damage equals 100. And then let's create a function that we'll call calculate damage. And in this function, what we wanted to do is calculate the damage to an enemy based off the base weapon damage and potentially a multiplier. And we're going to return that value. So let's first create our multiplier. So within the function, we're going to create another local variable called multiplier. And let's set it to let's do 1.2. So that equates to 120% of whatever we're multiplying against, or 2. And let's create a variable now that's going to say local total damage equals. Now we're going to use the weapon damage variable we set outside of the function times the multiplier that we set within the function. So in this case, this should result in us seeing 120 for the total damage because it's 100 times 1.2%, so 120%. So we would expect that to be 120 damage. And then we're going to return it. So return total damage. Now, what this does is in a game, you might see a script that looks very similar to this, and for there might be another function that's called something like function attack enemy, where maybe it passed to it the actual enemy that's being attacked, and probably the player that's attacking the enemy. And then from here, it's probably going to do something like let's see, enemy dot health equals enemy dot health minus calculate damage. And so this would subtract essentially 120 health from the enemy if it was done this way. It's probably not. Most games are going to implement this a little bit differently, but just to give you an idea how that works. All right, so out of this, what is an up value? So this variable up here is an up value. And the reason for that is because it's a variable that is defined outside the scope of a function, however, is referenced within a function. So since it's not declared in this calculate damage, it's declared outside of it, but calculate damage is using this. This means it's an up value. So with exploiting tools, we have the ability to go and find up values and change their root number. So by being able to set this up value to whatever we want, we should be able to change this 100 number to any number we like. So once again, up value is a value that's stored outside the scope of a function, yet is used within the scope of a function. All right, now while we're on that same topic, let's just switch over to constants and what those are. So a constant is something like what we see here for this multiplier, where it's equal to 1.2. A constant is normally a hard-coded value, just like what we see right here, that is just typically defined within the function. Once again, if it's outside the function, it'd be an up value. Inside the function, if it's a defined number like this, it will be a constant. Now, if the multiplier was another variable or returned from a different function, like let's say get multiplier by the player, this now will no longer be a constant because this is going to be returning a value from a different function. So to identify constants, you're looking for hard-coded strings or hard-coded numbers, or even other function names. can be included as constants. All right, so how can we modify this? Well, first thing we want to do is actually use this function to get the up values, because we need to understand what index in the function the up value is stored in to be able to modify it. And all that means is you can think of every item that's within a function is essentially in a table, and tables have indexes. So you need to understand which index this total damage, I'm sorry, this weapon damage up value is stored at. So to do that, Synops gives us a really easy function in our debug library called debug.getUpValues. However, most other exploits support just simply getUpValues. So that's what we'll be using today, and which will also work in Synops since they created an alias for it directly. So it returns a table of values, and so we want to iterate through that table. So as we explained loops in the past, we're going to just do a very simple loop for this. So we're going to say for index, comma, so I, comma, v for value, and pairs, get up values. Remember, that's the function that we want to use to find the up values. And then it takes one argument, and that's the function name itself. And so we're just going to take this function name, calculate damage, and pass it in there. Do. We're going to put an end statement there. So this is saying for every up value within this function, do something with it. Well, I just simply want to print it out because I want to see what they are. So we're going to print the index and the value of the up values. Now, just because I want to kind of keep this a little bit clean and know that I'm viewing up values, I'm going to create a print statement right above it and call this up values. Because right below it, I want to do the same thing, but for constants. So you can see exactly the difference between up values and constants. So I'm going to do another print command to add a little bit of spacing here. We're going to call it constants. Now, I'm just going to copy this code that we just used for getting up values, paste it right below here, and it's very simple. Instead of get up values, you want to change this to get constants, just like that. Right? So now this is going to print out the constants. Now, what I would expect to see here is that we're going to get an up value that's going to be this weapon damage, and it should show us an index of weapon damage and a value of 100. And for this command down here, I'm expecting that we're going to get an index of multiplier as a constant with the value of 1.2. All right, and let's just copy all of this code, and we're just going to go ahead and run it in our executor within Roblox. First, let me just set up the debug log so we can actually read it. Output, gear warning. All right, so I'm going to open up my executor window here, clear out any junk that's in there. I'm just going to expand it so you can see a little bit better. Now all I'm doing is pasting that code in, and we should see it print over here. One thing I want to do, yeah, that's fine. So let's just print it. All right, get up values. So the up value that it found in the up value statement was in fact weapon damage of 100. And then the constants that it found was the index of 1, constant of 1.2. And so now we have both a weapon damage up value and a constant up value. Now, this constant up value to me looks like something that is probably a little bit easier for us to modify and change. And so we can modify the weapon damage. Let's do one last thing. Let's run this again. And this time I want to print. Actually, let's go back to our code window here. I want to actually print before we do any of this. I'm going to print the actual damage return from calculate damage so we can see what it's showing. So I did a print statement, and then I just copied this function because we're expecting it to return this value, total damage. And so I'm actually just going to write total damage. So when you do a print command, by the way, you can separate it by using a comma, or you can concatenate it by using 2 dots, which is simply saying this plus this, print these together, but I usually prefer to use the comma. All right, now let's just go back here and run this again. Copy, paste, run. All right, so total damage is currently 120. Weapon damage is 100, and we have a 1.2 modifier. All right, now let's go back. So let's try to first change the multiplier. So we want to change that constant value. So I knew that from here it was at index number 1. See the 1 right in front of it, 1.2. So I'm going to use a command called set constant. So it's just set constant. Now it takes 3 parameters. The first parameter is the function itself. So once again, calculate damage is a function. Calculate damage, comma, the index in which it displayed. And since we already saw in our output, it's at index number 1, we're going to put 1, comma, and what we want it to be. So right now, it's 1.2. So let's just make it 2. So let's do 200%. And if we do that, we should, and we run another print statement of the total damage after, we should see that it's going to now reflect a 200 damage instead of 100 damage. Put 100 damage here as a comment just so we can tell or see. So once again, what we're doing is we're modifying this multiplier. Now, you only need to run this one time in your game, and it'll change that constant and that function every single time it's ran. So we'll go back to our code window, we'll paste it, and let's see what we get. All right, so remember the original damage was 120. It found the up values, the constants. It modified the constant, and now the total damage is showing 200. So if we were to run this again, we should see 200 again and again and again. And that is quite simply how you set a constant. Now, to set an up value, you would do that very similar. You would say set up value, and it takes the same parameters. So you want to use the function name. The calculate damage, the function name, the index, and then the value you want it to change to. So this right now is 100, and if we wanted to make it, let's say 500, that is how we would simply set the up value. So now what we would have is we would have this weapon damage being now equal to 500 instead of 100, and the multiplier being equal to 200% instead of 120%, which means that we would have a 1000 damage. Now this is a little bit of a simplistic view on how to set up values and set constants. Really what you need to learn is how to recognize what are up values and what are constants within the game. So far what we've done is created a quick little function to explain what are up values and what are constants, how to view up values and view constants of functions, and then how to set the up values and the constants within a function. All right, well, it's not always that straightforward because once again, you have to find an up value in a constant. So let's look into the game and see if we can find anything in a script using darkdex that looks like an up value or a constant that might be something we'd want to use. So let's just go into the player scripts group here. This is typically where you'll find a lot of different scripts for your player area. Let's see, modules. Just pick, just pick egg open effect just for an example. Let's look at that. All right, now in this decompiler that we're using as Synapse, typically a variable that begins with u that's within a function is going to mean it's probably an up value. So think of u as an up value. When you see variables that are beginning with v, they're usually a reference to either another script or another event that you're not able to modify with an up value. And so we look through here. You want to find things that look like u for up values, or look for a hard number like this. So this would be a constant. If we were to look at this hatch function here and get the constants for it, we would certainly find this number 9 within the constants, which means we could change the camera zoom distance, minimum zoom distance, to any number we like. Same thing with the animation play set for 0. We could change that if we like. You can even change some certain functions like tick here. Tick is a function that essentially just returns a second in time. We could change this to something like min, max, weight, anything that we want. We can replace that with fairly easily. So all these are constants that we'll be able to modify, these zeros here. Then going down further, just looking for anything that might be useful. Not a whole lot in here. These are all just references to various modules or GUIs within the game, so won't really need anything there. All right, so let's actually, you know what? Let's try to find something that's a little bit better, easier to understand. Let's go to controllers here. All right, it looks like this pets module might be a good one for us to check out. So I'm going to right click on it, view script, see what we got. All right, calculate max equipped. I don't see a lot of things promising there. Maybe calculate pet capacity. All right. All right, I see some constants here. I think this would be a good one for us to try. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to view the constants and the up values of this function, calculate pet capacity. Now, since it's within a module script, what we need to do first is reference and require the module script so that we're able to access this function directly from it. So what we need to do is right click on the module script here, and I'm going to go to copy path so we can have the path location. I'm going to go back into Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to put some spacing and add it up here. I'm going to type in local mod, short for module script, equals require, and you can watch my last video for more details on how to require module scripts. And I'm going to Control V, paste in that location to the module script that we want. And if you recall, I believe the function was called get pet capacity, but let me just run over to the code again to see. Sorry, calculate pet capacity. So that is what we're going, the function that we're going to want to use in our up value and constants. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this this test function that we created. We're not going to need to calculate damage anymore. And so for up values, instead of this one function called calculate damage, we need to first reference the module script the function lives in. So in this case, mod dot. Now we're going to index the actual function that we're trying to get up values for, which is calculate pet capacity. So now we have the module script and the function that we want to get up values for. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to come down here and paste it into the constants as well. So we're able to go ahead and view both the up values and the constants for this module script. All right, I'm going to just highlight this section where we have our get constants, get up values, and our module script required. I'm going to copy it, go back into Roblox, and I'm going to hit, let's see, the F9 key to bring up the developer console. I'm going to just pull that up so we can see it, scroll down. I'm going to open up my executor window, paste all of that in, and hit execute. All right, so right now I see that we have a up values, which returned a table. That's not going to be really useful for us. You can modify an up value if it's a table, but what you'll have to do is reference the index and replace the whole table. So that's outside the scope of today's video. But if you want more on that later, I'm happy to show you another video on how to modify tables with up values. So let's look at constants. All right, there is a couple numbers here that are promising, number 6 and number 7. Now, full transparency, the reason why they show 100 and 500, it's because I already modified them while recording this video and it did not record. So I'm going back in and recording this part again. So I'll show you how I modified these values and what they originally were. So first look at the value at index number 6. Now I'm going to go back to the script here. In index number 6, let me close the developer window. Index number 6 was this 25 number. So I changed 25 to 100 to see what it would do. And it did nothing, so so that's fine. And the reason for that is if you read this code, it's looking to see if I have this super upgrade. And if I have the super upgrade, and then it multiplies it by 25, which I don't own the super upgrade, so that's not going to do anything. So the next one was the 3. And now that 3 was at the index, we'll go scroll down here, of 7. And so I wanted to modify this and see what happened. And when I modified it, it did in fact change my pet capacity from 103 to a much higher number. So I'll just go through the steps to do that. So going back to the code window, we want to once again use this set constant function here. Now, we're not going to reference the function this way. Once again, we need to reference it using the module script dot the function name. So as you recall, set constants takes 3 parameters. First one is the function, and that's what we've passed here. The second one is the index that we want to modify. In this case, it was 3. Actually, let me just verify that. Go back here real quick. Open up where we printed it out. Sorry, no, it's index number 7. And now its original value was 3. So we're going to change it back and see what happens if my pet capacity goes back down. All right, so now that we have this, calculate pet capacity, we want to modify the constant on index 7, and I'm going to change it back to 3. I'm just going to copy this whole section. We don't really need these prints anymore, but I'll just leave them in there anyways. Go ahead and copy this. I'm going to go back to Roblox. Close this, look at my current pet capacity, which is a much higher number because of the 500 multiplier. We're going to close it, and I'm going to try to change it back, and let's see what happens. Change it back. Now, for this to work, let me go ahead and close this window. You most likely need to change or modify the GUI here so it updates. So I'm just going to click on a pet to upgrade it. And bam, it went right back to 109 where it was before. All right, so we reset it. So let's go back to the code now and try to get a much higher pet capacity. So instead of having this at 3, which was the original value, we're going to bump it up to something like, let's say 250. Once again, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back into Roblox, open up my editor window, paste it in, execute. We're going to go back to pets. Still showing 109, but let's refresh the GUI. Wow, bam. Now we have an 850 capacity. And we can now go back in and just change this 250 number to whatever you want. So let's just change it to 900. Execute. Go here, update the GUI. Bam, now we have a 2800 pet capacity. And that is as simple as it gets for setting constants and up values. All right, well, we'll just review the code once again. We required the game module in which had the function that we wanted to edit or view the up values and constants on. We printed out all the up values, didn't find anything interesting, printed all the constants using the get constants function. And from there, we found some values that were interesting, and then we used the set constant command to go ahead and modify that. And if you wanted to modify up values, it's almost the identical command, but instead of set constant, it's set up value, and it has the same 3 parameters. You would pass to it the function that you want to modify, the index of the value that you want to modify, and then the what you want to modify it to. And once again, these print statements here, you'll find that index. It'll be the first thing that prints out before the value. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you once again for watching our tutorial series. Please remember, if you like the video, to hit that subscribe button and leave some comments down below. If there's anything that you want to see in a future tutorial series, please put it in the comments so we can look into it. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.